You are listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxshall, in which I chronicle my life and attempts to become a professional writer by, doing some writing daily, hopefully. Hello, today is Monday the 18th of November 2024, aka NaNoWriMo Day 18. And you're listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer. And I left it on a bit of a cliffhanger yesterday. Was I going to go and watch the podcast being recorded in London? I didn't. I wasn't in the mood. I just didn't fancy the train and driving to the railway station, or the other option was to get a bus to a different railway station, which would have left me on a train, the slower train, and I just wasn't in the mood, so I didn't. But I've had an ish productive day. So I did do a little bit of work on chapter 37. I didn't do it as part of a live stream. I just wasn't in the mood to do that. But I have managed to do some of my paper read through, and it still needs a few more. I'm still editing. I'm still changing things, annoyingly, because I was kind of hoping, because I did do quite a lot of sweeps on the screen. So I was hoping that the paper read-through would be an easy one, but no, of course it isn't. It's conspired not to be today, but it's progress of sorts. It's kind of, it's a step in the right direction. It's a small step. I'm certainly not going to finish this by the end of this month, but it would be nice to maybe get another chapter done this month, but we'll see how I feel. So yes, that's what I've done today. What else? I'm actually reading a book at the moment, which I kind of want to briefly mention. So I'm a big fan of a writer called Douglas Adams. He is most famous for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a series of 5 books, 6 if you include The Ghastly Thing Ghost, written after he died, and also a series, 2 books called the first one's called Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and the second one is a sequel featuring the same character. And the other thing that was released under his name after he died was a book called The Salmon of Doubt. Now, The Salmon of Doubt was his working title for a third book in the Dirk Gently series. Now, he never finished it. I don't know even if he was even working on it when he died. I have a funny feeling he wasn't, because it looks like he'd put it to one side. It looks like basically he'd decided that it would make a better Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy story than a Dirk Gently story. So he'd sort of parked it, and with the possibility of maybe going back, because basically the final book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, which I think is called Mostly Harmless, but I could be wrong. The final one he wrote, it's very, very dark. He basically wrote it having had, there's the other thing about The Salmon of Doubt is it's a collection of speeches he made, articles he wrote. In fact, the early part of the book is put together as though it's almost like a biography, an autobiography that he's written, because they kind of sequence the stories in the order in which they occurred. And it is genuinely quite interesting. And then, as I say, the last third of the book is taken up with the first 11 chapters of this Salmon of Doubt, which, in one of his intros, one of his interviews, he said it was probably not a Dirk Gently book. It would make a better Hitchhiker's book. So he would come back to it at some point, because he didn't like the way he left Hitchhikers. He said he didn't want to write loads more of the books, but he was hoping that maybe, he would come back to it. Because the last book he wrote when he had what he described as a really shit year, and it is quite a bleak book, ends with what appears to be everybody getting killed, all the main characters being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being killed when the Earth is unexpectedly demolished to make way for a new hyperspace bypass. So, which is how the first book started, interestingly. But he's a great writer. His other claim to fame was, basically he'd been trying to get money by writing and was just failing miserably at doing that. And then he got a commission to write. He wrote the first episode of Hitchhikers and finally got a commission to write the rest of the series. But then literally the same week, he got a commission to write a Doctor Who story. So from having nothing, he suddenly got too much work. And in fact, I think what actually happened in the end was he had to get help writing the last 2 episodes of Hitchhikers so he could get the Doctor Who stuff done. He eventually became a script writer on sorry, not a script writer, the script editor on Doctor Who, and the season that he's in is full of Hitchhiker's Guide cross-pollination. So there's a bit where Tom Baker's character is stuck in a mine shaft or something, and he's reading a book by Ulan Khulufid. And Ulan Khulufid famously wrote his best-selling trilogy, Where God Went Wrong, Some More of God's Greatest Mistakes, and Who Is This God Person Anyway, which are referenced in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's quite nice. And he died very, very suddenly and unexpectedly in 2004, and it's such a shame because he was never one of these people that was going to write a book a month or a book a year. But what he did write was always worth reading, and he was only 52. I think he was very young when he died. I mean, it was such a shame. Yeah. So yes, so I'm reading The Salmon of Doubt. I'm towards the end of it, and obviously I'm not going to find out what happens in that story because it was never finished. I've only got another 3 or 4 chapters to read. But yes, it was very nice. And then I think I have read everything is because I resisted reading the Dirk Gently stuff. And the reason Douglas was never a man who wouldn't use an idea. So he actually wrote the season that he was the script editor for in Doctor Who. And I'm not quite sure why this happened, but he ended up having to write the last story. And I can't remember from the history if it's because he wanted to write it or if another story fell through, because the script editor would oddly enough be the person who had to write. If scripts fell through and became unworkable, the script editor would have to knock something up. And he wrote a 6-part Doctor Who story called Sharda. And one of the characters in Sharda is a guy called Professor Chronotis, who lives in Oxford University, and he's actually got a room that's actually it's not actually a room in the university, it's actually a TARDIS. It just has landed in the university and it looks like a door off one of the corridors and stuff. And it's the character and some of the situations in that story, because the story never got finished. There was a strike, so they filmed all the location stuff in Cambridge, Oxford, and then the story was never finished. They only did one of the 3 studio sessions, so it just never got done. So because he never thought it was going to see the light of day, he reused large chunks of the story and some of the characters in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. So Professor Chronotis, his Doctor Who character, who was a Time Lord, ends up not as a Time Lord, but in a very similar situation in Dirk Gently. So that's quite good fun. And then of course eventually the story did get finished. What they did, various opportunities over the years. So in the late 90s, they got Tom Baker in to record linking narration around the footage that had been filmed and wasn't, but it was quite, so episode 1 was almost complete. There was only like 1 or 2 scenes they hadn't been able to shoot, whereas the final episode, there was only a couple of scenes that they had shot. So it was quite sad, really. So it's like, the first episode is 25 minutes long, give or take. The last episode is about 6 because Tom Baker just explains the script. And then in the 2000s, they remade the story as an audio drama only, starring Paul McGann, and made it an 8th Doctor story. And then a few years back, they finally did what they should have. Well, they finally decided the best way to finish it would be to animate the sections that didn't exist. And what was absolutely brilliant was they got all of the original cast back and got them to record audio, to recorded audio versions of the scenes that hadn't been recorded, and then did the animations for them. Oh, this has become a bit of a Douglas Adams rant. Yeah. And so finally the story got released 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And I think it actually got shown on BBC Three as well. In that format. Anyway, so yes, huge Douglas Adams fan, should finish that tonight, and I'll do a little bit more work on Empress of the Trees tomorrow, hopefully. Sorry, that was a bit of a waffle. You can tell I'm enthusiastic about something because I lose track of time and it's more than 6 minutes long. But yes, if you've never read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, read it. It's funny, it's silly. I mean, I can quote bits of it wholesale, I really can. There's a bit where, I will stop talking a minute, I promise. There's a bit where a character called Arthur Dent has basically not gone through his post properly. So he's missed the fact that his house is going to be demolished to make way for a motorway. And they turn up, the demolition teams turns up at his house to knock his house down. And he's having this absolute argument with the guy who's running the demolition team. And he was like, and he was saying, well, I did eventually find the information. He goes, and what did he say? The foreman of things. Well, the information was on display at the local planning department for the last 9 months, he goes. And Arthur goes, well, I mean, you hadn't called much attention to it, had you? You know, like actually telling anybody or anything. And he goes, it was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet stuck in a disused lavatory with a sign on the door saying, beware of the leopard. I don't know why I find that so funny. Oh, did I really need to add that extra bit? No, I didn't, but I'm not going back and deleting it now. Anyway, goodbye from me. I'll be back at some point tomorrow. But no, read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's terrifically silly. Take care, bye-bye. You have been listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxall. Thank you for tuning in to my random ramblings, and if you'd like to know more about me or my projects, visit my link tree at linktr.ee/Richard Wright, capital R, capital W. Thank you for listening.